This is our Forex video blog for March 25th, 2011. And like what we do most days, we want to see which currencies are the weakest, and hopefully those currencies have a lot of statistical weakness today, like the dollar did. So at midnight, you'd want to be looking for some sells in the dollar, because the daily, weekly, monthly trend's down and there's a lot of statistical weakness here. You can see it had a little bit of a counter trend move, and right before midnight it started to go up again. The dollar started to get strong, but it really didn't have that much at all. So as soon as you see some weakness come in, you can jump all over that because the longer term trend's down. And basically at midnight, the euro has a daily, weekly, monthly trend that was up, but it didn't really have any strength at that time. The Australian had totally changed its longer term trend, and it actually started to show some strength again right at a little bit after midnight. And so that's a decent one to be looking for buys in. Strong Australian, weak dollar, and if you look at the Australian pair, you can see coming into midnight this was above the hourly. It also was having very low volatility. It found support here at the hourly, and when it started to go back up, you might have got into that trade. You can see there's a narrow range 4-hour bar pattern. When currencies break out of that, typically trends begin, and this one did. It went up about 50 pips. And usually when you're trading with a trend, you can expect two waves in your favor. So this was the first wave. If you bought this right around the 200, went up once, went sideways, and then you want to look to get out near the 1.38 or 1.618 fib level. Usually a great place to get out of the trade. And in this case, we also have a little bit of a pullback to the previous day's high. If you draw your fibs on that, the Elliott two-wave Fibonacci fib profit target levels are good places to get in. You can see that trade work perfectly. And then, it didn't make a higher high here, and it didn't show off the chart's statistical momentum, but it did, after a while, kind of consolidate sideways into a nice little square rectangle. And when it broke out, after finding support here at the previous day's high, this was a very high probability place to get in, and you want to do the exact same thing with the entire move to get an idea where your profit targets are. Notice it went right to the 1.618 fib. It also went right to my Fibonacci profit target, which I felt was going to be the high of the day, and it was. It turned out, I did this yesterday at 6 o'clock Eastern time, and 12, 14 hours later got hit. And I'm not saying you should look for a counter trend trade here, but because the Australian dollar was up so much, I mentioned this in our live room earlier, you might want to look to sell this area, and it has pulled back kind of nicely, especially in the last half an hour. You also have a perfect example of a double top with divergence, and when that happens at a fib target intraday and also on a longer term Fibonacci profit target, this is a Fibonacci cluster zone right there, and if it can't break through that with all this kind of statistical momentum earlier, it's very likely to later. Now the yen also is pretty weak today. The monthly trend on this one is actually up though, so you also would have wanted to look for Australian yen buys today, and you can see a double narrow range pattern right here. It breaks out, and it really went up about 50 pips. You have a pullback here. The Elliott two-wave pullback actually went down more than where the fib level was, but it kind of went sideways, didn't break back into the previous day's range. When a currency is above the previous day's high, that's bullish, and anytime you get a pullback where volatility decreases and you have a little sideways rectangle pattern like that, it's pretty high probability when it breaks out again. And this one went a little bit higher than our first fib target, hit the second fib target, and almost to the pip. That's where it started coming back down. Also, this one has been up a few days in a row, so it's decent counter trend trade when the momentum kind of runs out. Pound very weak today. I prefer not to buy a weak currency against a strong one, or sell two of them that are both weak on the longer term basis. But around 435, the dollar became really strong, and the pound was consistently weak. You might have looked for some pound sells coming into 5 o'clock, and this one's underneath the hourly, which means it's more likely to go down. And it kind of went up and had a false breakout above the hourly right here with almost no statistical momentum. And when it finally broke down and broke new lows for the day right here around 61.05, a decent place to go short. You also want to draw your fibs off this last wave to get an idea of where the fib target is. it's all the way down here. It came down to the lower containment bands, kind of ran out of steam. Decent place to get out. And when it came back again and wasn't able to get back above the hourly, you might have looked for a short or two in here. It is down significantly right now. It's starting to get a little bounce off the lows. This currency I think has been down 3 or 4 days in a row now. The New Zealand was also strong, so the New Zealand dollar, New Zealand yen buys. I'll just quickly show that chart, and you can see, it trended up today, of course. Went right to a Fibonacci retracement level and Fibonacci profit target level. Lots and lots of resistance up there, and of course that's where the high of the day was made. Having that on your chart saves you from having to spend 30 or 40 minutes of multi-time frame Fibonacci analysis each day. I do it for you. Another currency that was strong today, that is extremely strong today. The weekly and monthly trends down, however, was the CAD. So you might have traded, the CAD against the weak Swiss. Let's take a look at this. CAD Swiss is very likely to explode up. Let me put the CAD Swiss on here, and you can see that's exactly what happened. Notice the price was above the hourly, it came down, found support here, it went sideways. When it broke out of this narrow range right here, you might have gone into the trade around 93.42. This is your first profit target, and this area up here is your second. Just kind of, meandered up. Went up about 60 or 70 pips. Not with a lot of extreme strength, but the beginning of the day, that was a phenomenal and very high probability currency to trade. The euro really wasn't strong today. We are having a lot of strength right now in the dollar. The euro and the Swiss are the two weakest ones. So you could be looking to sell the euro dollar. You can see it broke down right here and it's fallen about 50 pips. It's right at a Fibonacci retracement level, so it's pretty likely, it could go another 20 or 30 pips underneath this, but more likely than not, you're about to get a bounce in the euro dollar here. You can watch and check my prediction later. If I was going to trade right now, I might hopefully wait for it to fall another 15 pips and start scaling in around 40.65 to 40.50 for a nice little 10 to 25 pip or even more bounce back. I wouldn't be buying it right now because of how weak it is. If it went sideways there for 30 minutes or an hour, the longer the better, and then broke out, I might consider buying it. But being on a Friday, it is drifting down now. You can see, when you see extreme weakness, don't rush in to buy. Let the currency prove to you it's not going lower, and then at your own convenience slowly get into a counter trend trade. That way you can save yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of unnecessary losses.